Hello, this is Luke Turner, and I'm back with another episode of building an exercise tracking web app from scratch. Let's get started here. Going to run the database. Oops. Going to run the client-side code bundler. And we're going to run the server. Then when this is done, we're going to open it in the web browser. And we're ready to start development. Okie doke. So let's take a look at the notes, see what we've got to do. We've got some tasks here that we could improve things. And we've also got some ideas here, which is like more new features. I'm kind of inclined to pick a new feature today. One of the things that I like to add in apps is help text or some kind of manual. Maybe we could spend some time on that today as well. Let's see. Also, we have routines. That's kind of an idea that I have around having people can kind of put in their planned routine in the app and it'll automatically sort of create their sets or a template for their sets. And associating timestamps seems like a decent idea. Shareable links. I don't know. Let's worry about the manual for now. So probably what we're going to want is another button on the top here that's like manual. And then when people click that, it'll take them to a page where they can read about how to use the app. So let's just start with that. In the layout, we're going to add a new link here. And this link can probably be visible even if there's no user. So let's take it out of that if statement here. This is something that, what is that? What is that? I don't really know. Well, anyway, manual, some kind of weird, is that Copilot doing something? Some kind of extension? I don't know. Well, you're right about that. Whatever's doing that. Okay. So this is going to be the manual. So if we refresh here, there's that manual button. If we sign out, it's still present there. If we click it, it should take us to a page that doesn't exist. Is that what's happening here? Yeah, but it's redirecting us. That's interesting. Well, whatever. Okay, so let's add now a controller method for that page. And we'll kind of have to see exactly what this looks like. But for now, we're just going to start with something simple. I guess we're going to go up to the very top basically here, and we're going to have a new controller method, not on the authenticated router. So this is going to be /manual. And then maybe there could also be a page like that, because the manual might have multiple pages in it. Usually I don't like to have everything just in one big page. So that's fine. And then we're going to render a manual view here. We're going to continue with the view bag. That's going to have some useful stuff. Title is going to be the page title. but for now we're just going to say manual. What is that? Let's actually turn off some of these extensions because I'm finding whatever is doing that to be a little annoying. It's probably either Cody or Copilot. Now, if I restart, yeah, okay. Okie doke. So, back to what I was doing. So here, there's a title, and then there's, I guess, going to be some kind of content. Let's just call it content. And for now, that's just going to be const content test. And get rid of this. I'm also going to add a little redirect from this base page here. Well, do I want to do that? Not sure. I'll maybe do that in a moment. First, let's parse out this param here. So we've got our page. And that's going to be page is z.enum. And I mean, we could do string, but we're also probably going to want to limit this a little bit because we're probably going to be using this to look some stuff up from the file system, but I'll get to that in a minute. Anyway, so we've got our page here, and let's do it like this, actually. We're going to add a regex where we say it's just A to Z, 0 to 9, and dashes. That's all that can be in the page. It has to be just that, and then we can do like the, I think it's like up caret here, and then dollar at the end, something like that. Basically saying the string has to just be alphanumeric. Okay. And let's just do that. Okay, so let's make our view here before we get too much into this. So manual.pug. And I'm just going to copy maybe the index page. And in the content block here is where we're actually going to put our, basically just our content. So I might do like a div.content content. And let's look at the Bulma docs here real fast. I think content is the thing. We want something that's basically going to enable like a standard typography. Like this, I think. Yeah, content. So now anything under here is going to be rendered sort of as standard HTML or whatever. Like paragraphs are going to be properly sized, headings are going to be properly sized, etc. So now if I go here, we see that test. If I comment this out, what happens? Probably a 404, right? Well, a 302. I don't really know why that's redirecting everything to a 302, or redirecting. Let's try something here. If I sign in and then click manual, Now I'm getting a 404. So there's something kind of interesting there where the authenticated router is causing a redirect maybe, even when it's a page that doesn't actually exist in that router, as long as it also doesn't exist in this other router or something. But I actually don't mind that 302 redirect functionality, so I'm just going to leave that for now. It would be nice actually if it did that even when somebody was logged in maybe. But anyway, so one of my questions now is like with Express, is it possible to write a route where the parameter is optional? Seems like not really, which is fine. So I'll just do a get slash manual, and this here can just do a res.redirect to like slash manual slash what would we call the root page here? Like home, index, main, maybe contents. It could be sort of like a table of contents page. Or maybe like intro. Sure. Okay, so now if I actually go to that manual, it's going to redirect me to this intro page. And so now we need to actually start figuring out how to populate these pages, right? Like, so what I can do is have like a pug view where I write the content in pug, kind of similar to how in the index page we have this content. But what I actually want to be able to do is write this stuff with Markdown or something like that instead. So probably we are going to need some kind of library for that. I don't know what the best option is there. There's like, I've heard of this one, Marked. So maybe I could use that. There's also some other tools that they're not actually libraries, I think, like Remark. This one's more of like a CLI tool. Looks like it's also a Node API. It's kind of complicated. The nice thing about Remark, though, is it does have a lot of like extensions and stuff built around it as well. So like, if I recall, there's like math plugins and things like that. Not that I really need math for a manual. But let's try using this. So suppose I want to actually use Remark. I would need to install a bunch of this stuff, right? So there's like Remark parse, Remark rehype. Let's just get these going here. Fun, install, Remark rehype, Remark parse, Remark stringify. I mean, what is that? Turn, I don't really need that, do I? maybe I do. I'm just going to follow these, these same things. Basically this exact code example. And what is unified? Unified is the core project that transforms content with ASTs. Okay. Okay. So that's the base thingy. Okay, fine. Does feel like a lot of things here, but whatever. Okay, and then we're going to be doing something like this. So it's sort of like building a pipeline, it looks like here, where we have now we can, you know, add all these missing imports. Let's see what that actually added here. Yeah, okay. Okay, so test. And then this would be content. Right. So this is probably going to not quite work. Let's see what we get here. Oh, got to restart the server. Yeah. So when we're doing this in Pug, we're going to need to embed this not as plain text, but as actual HTML. So I think there's a way to do, yeah, literal HTML, or not literal HTML. We want interpolation, unescaped interpolation, I think is what we want. That's not useful. Yeah, so let's see what's this unescaped interpolation. So if I do a div content, I wonder if I just do it like that. What's that going to do? Okay, that works. So we've got our HTML. Normally, you know, if I was using, so this is kind of, it's called unsafe interpolation. And the reason that it's unsafe is because when you're embedding HTML, it's like that HTML can potentially, you know, in this case, it's basically just content. But if the user is controlling that content, it could have things in it like iframes or, you know, other kind of unsafe elements that maybe you don't actually want to just be rendering in your page. So normally, you know, if you're rendering some HTML, especially HTML that's like user provided, you want to sanitize that first to make sure it only has like a certain set of tags in it. You know, sometimes you don't even want there to be like links to external sites and things like that. All basically to avoid people using your page to do like a, what do they call it? Like a reflection attack? I'm not sure. Whatever it is, where, you know, they render some content on your page that looks authentic, but it's actually provided by an attacker, and then that can be used to trick users. But in our case, we don't really, or, you know, they could even embed script potentially and like actually run JavaScript. Again, mostly around tricking other users, but In our case, because we're the ones who are going to be authoring and managing this content, we can just embed it as is. Technically, we probably don't even need to do this sanitizing business, but because that's what the example had, I'm just going to include it. Okay, so now kind of the idea here is we're not just going to process, obviously, some plain text. We're going to read this from a file. So let's just go ahead and put that in there. So if we do like read file, what is the, let's see, node fs. There is like a promise-based API as well. We want like this. I guess it's just, yeah, read file. I wonder why this isn't like being aware that that can be imported automatically. I don't really know, but I'll just add it myself. So we're going to import read file from this. And now we should be able to do that. So the path here is going to be something. Basically, I want to have like a new folder called manual. It could be under source, or it could just be under the root page here. And then like in here, let's make a new file called intro. Or intro with an R. And in here, we'll just put some, this is an intro. Yes. Okay. So now we're going to want to basically be able to read that file. So the file here is manual slash, and I got to figure out how these paths are going to work, slash page dot md. And you can kind of see, and then this is going to be encoding UTF-8. So you can kind of see why I wanted page to be limited to just these numbers and letters and a dash, because if somebody had like a, like if you could include dots in it, you could do like manual slash dot dot slash dot dot slash whatever and start like reading files from elsewhere in the file system, which we don't want to allow. So this way, you know, it can only read from that particular page. Now, kind of my question is, it's sort of like, what is the working directory when the app is run is what's going to decide where this goes. So because this is a relative path, right, it doesn't start with a slash. If you run this app in the root folder of this project, I think this should work. The problem is that if you try running the app from a different folder, I think that it might not work. Let's see if this works in the root folder, just as an illustration. So we got our code. Now, what if I do cd source and then bun run dev? Well, that's actually not going to even let me do that, which is fine. But suppose I were to do like bun run index.ts like that and refresh. Well, now it's not working because of this. Yeah, okay. So we can see here that like, because we're running it from a different directory, this relative path thing doesn't work. So we need a way to, and you could be like, well, that's fine. Just only ever run it from the root directory. But that's kind of a strange requirement. So instead, what we're going to want to do is make this path absolute. But how do we know what the absolute path should be? Usually you base it off like some variable that has the current path of the running script. So let me see, like, and I can never remember how to do that exactly in Node. Node current file path __ dir name. I think this is probably what we want here. There is also, I feel like there is also like a module thing. Yeah. Import.meta.url. This is interesting. So let's go ahead and log this for a moment. Console.log input.meta.url. Or import, I mean. What's happened here? My terminal window is I'm typing in the terminal window and it's like the input's not going anywhere. Let's just make a new one here. Somehow it got into a weird state. Okie doke. So now we can see that that tells us that path, but it's actually a URL for whatever reason. So we need to do this file URL to path thing. And then you could use dir name to get the directory name, which in this case would be source. And one of the kind of problems with this, you'll notice, is that now if I were to say move this file into a subdirectory of source, the way that that happens is going to be different. So we have to remember to actually keep this code in the index file or some other file in the same directory in order to avoid problems. So I might actually make a helper method for this, but for now, not too concerned. So I'm going to do file URL to path. Let's actually make the helper method right now, just to make this a little bit more intuitive. Export function get manual path name string. So we're going to do file URL to path import.meta.url. Add import from bun. And then we're going to do dir name on that. No, I don't want the __ dir name. I want a I want this other dir name. Which again, like why is that not why does it not know that it can do that? I don't know. Anyway. So now this is going to be something like C users Luke Turner, whatever, source, right? And so now we're going to need to, let's actually look at the path module here because we can use that to join our paths. So we're going to do join, and that's also going to be imported from path. Dir name, manual, or the string manual, and then name. And really, so we kind of have two options here. One is we could move the manual directory underneath source, which is probably not a bad idea actually. Or we could do like a ... / kind of thing. But I'm just going to move the manual directory underneath source. Seems fine. And that should be good. So got to actually return this, of course. Okay, so that's fine. So now in index, we can do, oh, and I also should add a name. Let's do name.md. So this is going to be get manual path of page. Okay, so now if I refresh this, it still works. And now if I do that thing, let's get rid of that console.log. If I do that thing where I do cd source and then I do bun run index.ts, it should still work. Okay, well, ironically, the code that we wrote does still work. The problem is that actually express itself doesn't work because it can't find the views because those are also based on the path where the application runs. So when it's trying to render this manual view, it's like, where is that? It's not under source/views. Anyway, so doesn't really matter though. But now we have our manual page loading. So now, you know, the other thing that we could do here is get a list of all of the manual paths that are out there and pass that into this validation. Might be nice. So like if I do get manual paths, and then if I do like get, I don't know, get manual directory is just going to be this. And we don't need anything for that. And then get manual path is going to be the manual directory joined with the manual name. Maybe that doesn't need to be its own function, but that's all right. And get all manual paths. We'll add in the all in there to make it really clear. Pages, yeah, that's fine. So this is going to, basically we're going to get the manual directory and then we're going to need to list all the files in that directory, which again, let's check out the docs here. File system, I think readdir, is this right? Reads the contents. And what do we get back? Let's actually see what those look like. So if we do readdir, no, not that, this. And then we import that from node fs promises. And I guess we should await this. This is going to be async. And I guess returns an array of strings. Let's actually just get rid of that for now. You can figure it out yourself, right? TypeScript? Yeah. Okay, so let's go over here and do console.log. Get all manual pages. Just see, you know, is it just the file name? Does it include the full path each time, etc.? Forgot to await that. Okay, so we get just the file name relative to the directory. So this is convenient because now we just need to strip off the extension. So I wonder what this dirent object, does this have something convenient? No, okay. So we're going to need to strip off the extension. I think that's going to be under path again. Path.basename. And the suffix is the extension. So we would do something like, let's put this actually over here. So this is going to be this dot map file name. We're going to do base name f, x name f. Right? So we're saying find the base name of the path, which it's already just one portion. So all this is going to be doing is stripping off the suffix. And the suffix is calculated from the extension name of the path. So we could just put this as MD and it would work the same, but that's kind of assuming that we're never going to use a different file name, which we already have this coded up here, but you know, for now we're just going to do it this way. This is kind of the standard way to do it. So now if I go over here, refresh, we have that intro. And if I add, you know, another thing here where it's like about.md, I don't really know what we're going to call them all. But now we have about and intro in this array. So this array is what we're going to pass into the controller here. And I'm not going to do this lookup in the controller method each time. So I'm going to actually put a function or a utility value or whatever. Export const all manual pages is that. And maybe I can do this. I wonder if this is going to work. No, doesn't like that. Doesn't really matter. Okay, so now over here, we could have this just be an enum over all manual pages. And so what it doesn't like is the possibility that all manual pages could be empty. Basically, like the type of all manual pages you see here is a string, an array of strings. But an array of strings could potentially have no strings in it. Just an empty array. And for some reason, the zod.enum type is typed in a way where we've got this thing here where it's saying there's at least one string and then there could be more strings. So it's an array of at least one string. And because we know that the manual, like the value of that is not dynamic, it's always going to be the same based on what's in this directory. There's always going to be a value in there. So we're just telling TypeScript there's always going to be a value. That's what this as is doing here. Okay, pretty simple. So that's cool. I do want to maybe add some extensions here as well, actually, though. So basically, GitHub flavored Markdown. Let's see what this specifically has to say for itself. What features does this enable? Tasks, tables, strike through, auto-link literals. Mostly I want tables. I don't know if tables, let's see what is actually in common mark. Common mark, so there's bold, headings, italic, links, images. Yeah, just the standard stuff. But like there's no table here. But there is if we have this GitHub Markdown plugin. So we're going to add that. 21 packages installed just from that, huh? Don't really like that, but whatever. And I'm kind of curious, actually, this, what does the front matter do? Remark front matter. Does it just ignore it? Hmm. Don't really know. I feel like that's going to be a bit of a pain. So we're not going to worry about it. I was thinking it might be nice if we could have like these titles in the front matter of the markdown page, sort of like in a blog or something. But we can worry about that later if we do want to add it. I'm not going to be writing that many manual pages to begin with, so not too worried about it. Okay, so I got to add that in here. So it looks like it's going after parse and before rehype. So right in here. Yep. Okay, so with that, does this still work? Well, I gotta restart the thingy. Yep. Okay, that works. And then if I were to put one of those GitHub markdown things in there, like a strike through, then ta-da, we've got our GitHub flavoring. Okie doke. Okay, and then like in a manual page, if I wanted to link to another one, I could be like, see also about, and it would be a link to like /manual/about. And so with that, we can kind of go from one page to another, like so. And that seems fine. For the title, if we're not going to parse that out of the markdown, our options are kind of limited. What we can do is use the page name and replace dashes with spaces. And title case it. What is well formed? No, that's not what I want. I'm sure there's a better way to do this, but what we're going to do instead is page.split on dash. And then we're going to map those to say we're going to do s dot or s0 dot to uppercase. I wonder what the to locale uppercase does. I don't know. Just going to use the normal to uppercase. And then we're going to do the rest of S. Which I guess I can just put this also in here. So it's like s dot splice or splice, s dot substring 1. And then we're going to join those with a space. Okay, so now, you know, for intro, it's going to be just intro. And you can see that the I is capitalized there. If I do, like say I rename this to about this site, and then about this site, then refresh, click about. Oh, so that's an interesting wrinkle actually. So I added that manual page. It wants me to restart the server here, it seems like. Yeah. And we can see this is about this site. I could put this actually into the controller method so that it was rerun each time so that I didn't have to restart the server, but I'm not a huge fan of that. I wonder if there's a way to well, I don't know. It's probably just not like because these aren't actually imported files, it's not rerunning the server when they change. So I could maybe fix that, but I'm not too worried about it. I can just restart the server while I'm working on the manuals. So yeah, we're going to say that that's fine. And yeah, this logic seems fine. The title, I might just do something like that. So now we have like the manual in there as well. Okay. So now we've got our kind of manual system. One other thing we're going to want to be able to do in our manual system is use our icons. So I should probably try and figure out how that is going to work. So let's go just for my own memory. If we, maybe it'll be easier to look here. If we look at the icon mixin, it's doing something like this. So say I were to put this here. Obviously, we're not going to be able to use the pug format. I just want to use that as like a reference. So I class ti wait. And then just like that. Can you do that in Markdown? I don't even know. What if I do that? Does it render in there? No, it's not even in there at all. Is it because I have to restart the server? That might actually get annoying if I keep having to remember to do that. No, okay, so it's still not there. I'm thinking that might be getting sanitized. So we will need to update the something or other to not do that. There are no parameters for parse. So it's probably remark rehype sanitize, if I were to guess. That's doing that. I'm just going to take that out of the pipeline. and refresh. Still not seeing that. Is this one of those things where it's got to be like on a new line? If so, that'll be a bit of a problem. No, because now it's just stripping all that out still. What happens if I comment that out too? Gonna probably get something weird. Yeah, it's not even letting me do it. Okay. So what options does rehype stringify have here? Rehype stringify. Options. Allow dangerous HTML. Is that it? Allow dangerous HTML. True. Oh, okay. That the options are passed as a second parameter to use. I guess I'll keep sanitize back in since that, I don't know. Okay, that didn't really help. What if I take that back out again? Okay, so we're still not getting the icon thing. It does make me a bit sad. Is there an option here for remark rehype? Options. Does this also have to be allow dangerous HTML? Like there must be a way to do this, right? Yeah, okay. Now we actually have our icon. But it looks weird. Okay, but that's fine. Let's put it back into this. Let's just put it right there. Get rid of that ASDF. And so we've got it, but it's just like that square. Do we also need like a TI like that? Yeah, okay. So here we've got our icon embedded in the docs. We're going to want to use that when we're referencing the different parameters. Okay, so we've got kind of our framework in place for the manual. I'm thinking, I don't know, it might be kind of hard for me to write the manual on stream because it's like, I can't like write and also like talk at the same time unless I'm just literally saying the things that I'm writing as I'm writing them. But we can at least kind of think about what's going to go in here and sort of how it's going to work. So there would be like intro paragraph, explaining what exercise tracker is, disclaimer about it being a side project. Usually I like to have a little note where it's like, you know, hey, this is deployed as a hobby project, there's no guarantee that it's going to be up in a year or whatever. And then we would have like a table of contents. So it would be like manual content, or just call it like table or pages. I don't know. And then we would have like a list of pages for the different things that we would want to have a manual section for. So we could have one for like, I don't know. Let's actually start with just one page and then we can split it out later if we want to. So we would have a section for exercises where it's like you create your own exercises in the manage exercises page. And one of the nice things about having the manual in the app like this is we can also take this and do like a link to slash exercises. So if somebody's looking at this manual and they can actually click on that and be taken to the page in question. Exercises can have parameters. Which are used to record values associated with the exercise. Like weight, distance, duration, etc. You can have more than one parameter per exercise. Parameter values can be tracked over time. And then we could have like a table for the parameters. So we, it would be something like parameter name, description, and then dunk. I'm using the GitHub markdown table format here. So, then we could have like reps, number of times the exercise was performed in the set. And here I'm going to actually put in these icons as well. So unfortunately, because this is not in, is this going to work? Let's see if that works first. Yeah, it does. Okay, awesome. The reps one though is just pound, right? Let's copy this whole row and dunk. So this one is just going to be, reps is just a number. And then we can't actually use this mix-in in our markdown. So we kind of just have to reference it here and write the markdown manually. So weight is weight. So this one is weight. And assisted weight, or yeah, assistance. I don't really know exactly what to call this one. Just assistance. That one is life buoy. And distance is ruler 3. Distance, ruler 3. Duration is clock. That is, So we have reps, weight, assisted weight, distance, duration, intensity is activity. Intensity. I'm just going to call this assistance. It should match the parameter name defined here. So, okay, so here it's assisted. So that's what I should use over here as well. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is, I believe, the right number. So we shouldn't be missing any here. Cool. So now we would, just do a quick description for each of these. So weight is the amount of weight used for the set. I don't know. Kind of obvious, I guess, but whatever. Amount of assistance, negative weight, used for the set. Distance is the distance I don't know. I don't want to be too specific. Like I could say like the distance that you moved during the set, but like it could be that you're not moving. Like what if it's like shot put or something and it's like the distance that you threw the thing, you know? So I'm just going to do this for now. Just make them kind of a little bit tautological. Duration of the set. And intensity is the general intensity of the set. Low, medium, or high. Okay. And then I might also have a thing where it's like another column here where it's like units. And I wonder, I'm noticing that my table formatter thing, okay, so it kind of put those in the wrong place, but that's fine. Let's do space and just like don't save. Okay, cool. So here, like for number of reps, it's just a number. Weight is libs or kilograms. Assisted is libs or kilograms. Why is this all? Oh, yeah, I don't care about that. Distance is miles or kilometers. And maybe I'll not make these plural. Duration is min. And intensity is low, medium, high. And maybe I can get rid of that from here. Okay. We could also have a section on units, maybe just for fun. You can configure what units the app uses in the settings page. Settings page. Fine. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not really trying to wordsmith this at all. I just kind of want to have the sections down a little bit. And then I might write more of the manual upstream, or we'll see exactly what I do with that. But just having the space. So, and this can just be like manual. And this can go away. Okay. And just as a quick test, so if we go over here, we've been using these notifications to do kind of like little warnings. I might, yeah, like grab this, just gonna yoink this right in here. And then get rid of the delete button. And then let's see, can I do, this is a side project. Dunk. Yeah, just like that. And if I look at this, we can see this is in a paragraph tag. So because there's like a blank line between the div and then this, I can actually use markdown even inside this div, I believe. Yeah, very cool. Okie doke. And about this site, I'm going to delete that. I just created that for testing. Great. So let's start committing some of these changes. So to layout, we add that manual link. Manual view, very simple view. Adding the helper methods to the util file. This, so we don't need that one anymore. Importing rehype sanitize. Did I comment that out? Yeah, what if I uncomment that? Does that break anything? Yeah, it does. Okay, I'm just going to leave that out because really we don't need this stuff to be sanitized because I'm the one who's writing it. Okie doke. And then there's the intro actual page. Okay, so let's actually unstage all that though. First, I'm going to do the package.json files on their own. And I'm going to uninstall sanitize if we're not using it. Uninstall rehype sanitize. Okay. Add remark ecosystem libraries. Yep, seems good to me. And then add manual with some placeholder content. Cool. Okie doke. So we've got our manual. It needs filling out though, but let's actually update the to-do page, or I mean the notes page here. So I'm going to check this off, but I'm going to add a task to update and flesh out the manual. Okie doke. Got to restart the thing. Do a quick time check here. About halfway done. Definitely have time to do something else as well. let's see. So, I mean, a lot of these things are kind of in this to-do page because I don't really care about them all that much at the moment. So I might clean those up later, but I'm not really excited to do that. One of the things I recall though is like if we look at the historical thing for one of these pages, there's this here that we wanted to address. And I also don't really like how some of these are defaulting to 0 and others are not. But just let's go ahead and try testing this out a little bit. So let's create a new set here. And let's just see what that looks like. I kind of want to have something where it's like a link actually in here to the full manage for this exercise as well. So let's drop that in while I'm thinking about it. So in the today page, where we're rendering this table, maybe kind of alongside that date, we would also have a span or an A ref something see all. So now if I expand that, there's that see all link. And, you know, we're probably going to want a class on this, which is like ML2, maybe. Yeah, okay. And so this is going to go to /exercises /plus set.exercise.id plus /historical. Okay, so now I can click on that and I can click on that and it'll take me here. And if I click back, I think that takes me back. No, it takes me back here. So that's kind of an annoying thing with the back. It doesn't really, because we're going to this page by a different pathway, the button called back doesn't actually take us back where we were before. But maybe I'll put notes about that as well. Fix back buttons to actually take you back where you were before. There's a few options for that. You know, we could even maintain some server-side state to keep track of that, or it could just be passed as like a query parameter, or stored in the user's browser. But some way or other, we would need to keep track of like, okay, they were on this page and before they came to this page. And so when you click back, it takes them back to the page that they were on before. But we're not going to do that at the moment because we're doing something else. In fact, I might commit this little change here because this is kind of its own thing. Add link to historical page from exercise quick view. Okay, so anyway, so if I do this in a new tab here, the thing we just created today, we can see it's got these not a number pounds in here. And let's actually just pop open table plus and take a look at what that looks like in the database. What am I looking for? Sets, sort by date. This is the one from today. So the parameters, is there a way to maybe view that prettier? I don't know, doesn't really matter. Anyway, so we've got weight, assisted, and duration. Duration is an empty object altogether. wait and assisted have the unit, but they don't have a value. Let's, if we go manage exercises, dumbbell, add duration and intensity here so we can kind of see the default state for all of them. Go back to today and add a new one again. And let's see what the default state is now. Okay, so here we've got weight. There's weight, assisted, distance, duration, intensity, and reps aren't even in the like the object. Okay. Kind of confusing. So we kind of have a couple options here. Basically, when these tables, just as a reminder, the thing that we're trying to fix, when these tables show things like not a number pound, this is coming from this thing here. So because there is a unit, it's displaying the value and then the unit, but there's actually no value. If we looked at those parameters again, you know, it's like assisted, it just has unit pound, but it doesn't have the value in that object at all. And so this is ending up with not a number for the value. And that logic is coming from this display string function that we implemented, which I seem to recall being a little bit annoying. It's this function here. It's kind of a, I don't know, more complicated problem than you might think, I guess. But so like if we look at that, you know, weight, say, the value is doing this conversion. It's assuming that weight.value is present. So it's assuming that the parameter has a value and a unit. If the parameter doesn't have a value, this convert unit thing, like the value here is undefined, basically. And so when this is doing like undefined times something, or just undefined dot toFixed, we're getting not a number. Probably this number value is returning not a number, and then toFixed is just passing through the not a number. So really we shouldn't be calling this convert unit at all if the value is not a number. So if we go back to down here to the display string thing. So one thing we could do is we could update this display string function to handle cases where the parameter has no value. The other thing we could do is update the code that's saving these parameters to always include a value, so we don't have to handle the case where there is no value. A bit of the problem with that, though, is from a user's perspective, there might actually be a difference between no value and 0. Like for instance, if I just didn't fill out pounds at all, versus if I put a 0 in pounds, as a user, I might be thinking of those as meaning different things. Maybe the 0 is like, it was, you know, I did it with 0 weight, like squats. I just did the squats without any weight on my back. But if it's not filled out at all, then maybe that means something else, you know, like I don't remember or whatever. If I refresh, I'm curious, now that I cleared that out, it's still in there. So you see, that's kind of a thing too, is like these are populating default values. That's another thing to maybe deal with. But in short, I think we are going to kind of need to do a few changes on both sides. First of all, we're going to want to assume that there is a case where there's no value. But if there's no value, then there really doesn't need to be this object where it's got a unit in there either. It can, like, these values should just be like null. So let's do that. Let's look at where these exercises are saved. So like there's two places basically, when you're creating a new set and when you're updating an existing set. And maybe there's like, is this all pretty much the same as what we have up here? Seems like there's some kind of similarity there. I'm going to try to abstract this into another function, put it under sets, and we're going to call it something like export function get parameters, or like construct, let's just call it build set parameters, and figure out what this is going to need to do here. What's that about? No, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Parameters. So we're going to need an exercise. And that type is going to need to be defined here. Exercise, type of exercises table. And let's look at the format that we've got going on here. So we've got our exercise, and we're going through all of the parameters in the body. So we're going through all the parameters in the exercise, extracting the parameter from the body and constructing an object from it. So this function is going to need basically the exercise and also the parameters. Input parameters, which is going to be record, string, string. And so this would be like input parameters. This default units, we're going to need to import that. I guess this also needs the user to pass through to default unit, which is a bit annoying, but fine. And we're going to be returning parameters. So what are these things complaining about? String is not assignable to number. Which is fine. So if I look at the all parameters input schema here, I feel like these are all strings. So why is this not complaining about that? It doesn't even know the type of value. I guess because this is declared as any, the type of value is also any. So we can make that a little bit better. Like it would be like value is value. Well, let's just do number value. And here we would want to say like if value, then do that. Otherwise, do null. And this could be parameter value or null. And I mean, maybe we would just not include them at all, I guess. Doesn't really matter all that much. Let's just not include them at all. So let's undo what we just did here. And we can just say, that's number value, like if not value, then continue. Sure. And what that's going to do is it's going to skip the rest of this for loop if value is falsy. So if it's an empty string, or if it's null or undefined, or even if it's the number 0, which we kind of don't really like that, but because we know that it should be a string, it should never be the number 0. In theory, if it was 0, we would want to go through the rest of this function though. So maybe I should do like, instead of just doing that simple check, I could do like if value is an empty string, or value is null, or value is undefined. Those are basically the 3 cases where we're going to want to ignore it. Okay, and so then down here, this is, going to be number value again, number value. And this is going to be, maybe I'll actually do something else here where I'm like, numeric value equals number value if numeric value is not a number. Then continue here as well, kind of thing. Conditional, oh God, you got to do that weird thing. Is, do I want, maybe I could use is finite. I wonder if not a number is finite. The nice thing about that is it would also strip out infinity, which we don't really want as well. Let's just try it. Let's do bun REPL. Number dot is finite, not a number. False. What about number dot is finite infinity? Presumably also false. But if I do like number dot is finite 1, 2, 3, that's true. And if I do number dot is finite 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or whatever, that's also true. Yeah, so this is what we want. So we can do not, if it's not finite, then skip it. In other words, basically if it's not being parsed into like a regular old number, then we're going to skip it. And this, I mean, I guess can just go, I really don't like that whole thing with switch statements. So with switch statements, it's like they don't define their own block. So you can't redeclare these const things in each spot like that because you get these errors. Like each case is not its own block. There's probably a way around that, actually. I wonder, this is a weird thought. I wonder if you did something like this. I've never seen anybody do that in JavaScript before. But in theory, you can use these just braces anywhere to define their own block. But then does that, when you break? I'm kind of curious now. Switch case block. Case expression. Lexical scoping. Yeah, so this is kind of the issue that we were talking about. Each case doesn't create a lexical scope. And so this is actually, oh, so it does seem like that works. Wrap it in a block. Okay. Cool. Now we know. Do the same thing here. Wrap that in a block. And weight, we'll also need a block. And kind of the reason that I'm doing this in the blocks is because for the base case, actually say like for case, you know, I'm actually going to change how this works a little bit. So for intensity, we're just going to do this. And so currently intensity is falling into this base case where the parameter value is actually just the value. It's not an object. But I feel like I want it to be an object. I feel like that's going to make things a little bit simpler to think about here. It's just an object with a value property. There's no unit or anything because there doesn't need to be, but it's just got the value. And we're also going to want to do a little bit of validation here. I mean, like these validation schemas that we're using don't actually confirm that the intensity value is like one of the things it's supposed to be. I'm going to put that in here where it's like if low, well, let's see, is there a, yeah, all intensities. If all intensities dot map I dot id includes value. So we would like say, if not that, then continue. I mean, that's kind of the whole point is I'm checking to see whether it, whatever. Okay, so yeah. ID, yeah. Okay, so we're having, adding a little validation there. Because this is broken now into separate lines, I'm going to put to continue in a block so that I don't confuse myself later. And then this is assigning this to value. And it's going to complain until we update some other things. And then I'm going to add another case here for reps. And I'm not actually going to have a default case. I feel like that also just kind of makes it confusing. So for reps, we're just going to do basically the same thing as we've done up here, but without the unit. Some of these are a little bit repetitious, but that's okay. Number, case number, because this is the data type, not the parameter ID. Okay, so now we've got this function that's, parsing these into more of a standard useful format, and it's not going to actually include them if the value is not valid. And we could throw an error here if we see invalid values instead of just skipping them. Like in this case, we definitely want to always just skip it. In this case, maybe we should just like throw new error, invalid, let's do it this way, invalid distance value. And we could do the same thing here, invalid duration. Same thing here, invalid weight. Same thing here, invalid intensity. And the same thing here, invalid number. Okay. Don't really like that. Let's just put these in. Put these in braces so that it's easier to not mess that up. The problem with having them not in braces is it does work, but if you were to like say, do this, it's not necessarily clear that this and this are actually both basically the same line. Like there's no semicolon on this line, so the expression or statement or whatever continues to the next line. But if I were to put something else in here, like, oh, console.log, ooh. Now this error is actually not in the if statement. It's indented, so it kind of looks like it is, but it's not anymore. Which is also why this other stuff is grayed out now, because it's telling us this error is always going to be thrown. Whereas if we have this in a block, then if we add that console.log in here, that's going to work fine. So it's just kind of making it easier for us to not introduce bugs later. My kind of rule of thumb is always use a block for the if the condition and the statements that are executed for that condition are on separate lines. If they're on the same line, it's fine to not use the block because it's a lot more obvious what's going on. Okay. So this seems good. Now we just need to maybe add another case or default throw new error, invalid parameter .id. Break. Oh, I guess you don't need the break if you're throwing. Okay, fine. So, great. That's great. We have this problem here where some of these are typed or like these type errors, which is coming from this parameter value here, because we're kind of changing how this works. So this is never going to be able to be a number anymore. It's always going to be one of these objects. Intensity now is going to be, we're going to call this intensity value. And intensity is going to be an object, interface, intensity, which is going to have a property value, which is going to be intensity value. And we're going to also export interface numeric value, or yeah, sure, which is going to be value number. So then those both go in here, numeric value and intensity. I kind of want to just call this numeric, maybe. Okay. Okay, so we've got this build set parameters function. Now that should have fixed our errors here. So what are we complaining about here? Wait. Oh, right. So this should actually be using the numeric value. Here as well, like we don't need to do the number value cast again. We can just reuse that numeric value. Numeric value, numeric value, numeric value. Intensity, the value is a value as intensity value. And actually what we can do here, there's an interesting thing. We can make another helper function in here. Export function is valid intensity. And this is going to take a value, a string, and it's going to return S is intensity value. So this is what's called a guard function. And so it's going to have to return a Boolean, which is whether or not S is an intensity value. So this would just be like returning this, like so. And this is complaining. That should be as intensity value. Okay, so now if we do that here, so let's get rid of that as. So now if we do is valid intensity value, then if that's true, this should be, or if not is valid intensity, this should now know that value is an intensity value. It can infer that, if it's not an intensity value, then it's going to throw an error. So if we ever get to this code down here, value must be an intensity value. Using these kind of guard functions is better than just doing like an as usually. So yeah, anyway, good approach there. I don't know if that really belongs in validation, but I'm going to leave it out. This is mostly for like Zod validation, so it's kind of a little different. Okay, so now I've got this build set parameters function. Okay, what's going on down here now? Oh, this also has to be numeric value. Yes. Okay, so now this function works a lot more predictably, hopefully, and we're going to use that here. So like parameters is going to be equal to build set parameters with parameters in body, exercise, and user. Got a cough, one sec. Whew. Okay. Okie doke. So now we've got this parameters. We can actually get rid of this whole block here. Great. And we can do the same thing up here. But instead of parameters in body, this is, well, so this is using request.body. It really should be using, well, actually, so if we think about the flow here, when we add a new set, you're just picking the exercise. So creating a new set, it's actually not going to have any parameters in it at all. If this is like an API first app, then it would make sense to allow somebody to create the set with the parameters already set in there. But based on the flow of the way that actual UI works, there's no need for us to support that case. First you create the set, and then you set the values on the parameters when you actually edit these inputs. So we could have this handle that in this create function, but because it's not actually used and it's just something we would need to maintain for no reason, we won't. And this is not going to set anything in parameters at all. Okay. Maybe I'll set parameters to an empty object actually. Just do like parameters, empty object. Then we don't need to exercise either, I guess. Although, so one thing here is if you're creating this set, so the user for the set is always the user of the request, which is fine. But we need to make sure that you're not creating this set pointing to an exercise that you don't own, because that's just kind of odd. I don't know how much of a security risk it would be, but it's breaking the authorization boundary that the app should have. So we actually are going to read this exercise. And in this get exercise function, like it accepts the user. And we can see here, this is nice. I like how we can see the function right there. It only actually returns the exercise if the user is equal to the user ID. So what we can do is say like, if not exercise, throw new error. invalid exercise ID. Cool. And really, I mean, so like this one here, we should also do that. And really, this might as well actually use that exercise.id. And same thing up here. Okay. And delete shouldn't have a problem with that. Move shouldn't have a problem with that either. Yeah. Trying to think if there's any other places where we might have that issue of being able to create something that's linked to something else. But I think sets should be the only place where that's really a problem. So that's fine for now. Okay, so back to what we were doing. So now when you create the set, it has empty parameters. And when you update the set, the parameters are going to be defined differently. And so one thing, yeah, so let's just stop working on the code for a moment and test it out. So now if we look over here, you know, we've got these things where it's not a number, not a number, not a number. The way that these are stored is going to be changing now. So those tests are kind of invalid. If we add, well, let's actually delete both of these and add a new set. And now see what it looks like for today. So they're all just empty, which is what we want to see, right? None of the values have anything in them. And then if we were to say 1 rep, now what do we see? It doesn't even have the rep in there. That's interesting. Okay, so we got an error. Let's see what happened here. Interesting. So intensity here is low. Invalid intensity low, but that is a valid intensity, isn't it? But also, I don't really like how that, like I wish this drop down had like a default empty, but we'll worry about that later again, so I don't get too distracted here. Oh, so I knotted this twice, right? So is valid intensity should return whether it is valid. And then I sent that to another knot, which kind of messed it up. Okay, so now if I do a number, 1 rep, that works. Response is just okay. If I look over here, this is, we're going to need to update this because we changed the way that those values are stored. But we didn't get any of the other things with like not a number or anything appearing in them. The intensity is also not rendering at all. Let's fix that. So now what we need to do is update kind of the viewing side because we've kind of changed our schema. So in this display string piece, we're going to need to do, so distance and weight are fine. Duration is fine. Intensity is not fine. This would be value dot value. And this would be, so what are we complaining about here? Property value, so this would be like value as intensity. Okay. And then number is value as numeric dot number, or dot value, I mean. Okay, so now if we look over here again, we have our reps, we have our intensity, those things are working. And if I set a weight, 12, go back over here, refresh, that's working. If I set assisted weight, that should be exactly the same. Let's just do these all, distance duration, refresh, yep. If I set these to 0, that should show up differently. Or, it should show up as 0, not like not rendering anything at all. Okay, looks good. And in the table, I might actually have this just be like a dash. Like the empty state is like a little dash to kind of indicate that there's nothing there. Yeah, I like that. And I'm going to fix that over here as well before I forget. I kind of don't want this logic duplicated. Got to fix that too at some point. But in fact, maybe we should do that. So if we go to the display string, we could have like another parameter here where it's like, well, I mean, currently this is only returning, it's returning this object. But I believe the only places that it's using, it's this function. It's like combining that object into a single string. I kind of returned these values separately in case they would be needed separately. But for now, I'm actually just going to display object. And then I'm going to make another function, display string, which will do all the same things. And then it'll return this. So it'll be like const display equals display object, param value user, no, value. And these are all going to just be in there. And it's going to return this. Maybe I'll call this like display string for table and call this display string. Okay. And then this display string for table function is going to be passed in here as well. And we can use that in our tables for table. And here we don't even need that little bit of code. We can just put it right into the TD. And let's see what that looks like. Yep, looks exactly the same. So we can do the same thing in the today page. Display string for table. And that goes right here, and that goes away. So now if I look at this, yeah, it's working fine. Great. Lava and KL, what are we making? I'm making an exercise tracking web app. Also, sorry if you sent this message earlier, I just noticed it. This is my first time using Pug. Do I actually like it? I don't think I would go that far. It's a little bit annoying if I'm being perfectly honest. It is nice that it's terse-er than HTML, but the kind of having to remember the special syntax is actually slowing me down sometimes even more than if I was just writing HTML manually. So I don't know. I don't know. I wouldn't really recommend it if I'm honest. You had to revamp a previous project with Pug into Vue. White space sensitive components 5 indents deep are hell. Yeah, I definitely agree. The white space sensitivity is a bit annoying. Sometimes it's like I forget to indent something and it, causes a bug in the rendering of the page that it's not easy to figure out what's going on until you notice the problem. But I like Vue. I usually actually use React for my front end work. So this is kind of an experiment in rendering that HTML on the back end instead of on the front end. A lot of times when I'm doing these projects, the main reason that I'm even doing like a little hobby project like this at all is to kind of learn and experiment with new technologies to kind of see whether they're better than what I'm currently using. And with Pug, I don't think I would use it again. But I'm also not going to refactor this whole app to stop using it either. We're just going to keep going with it. I do also have, like for actual JavaScript interactivity, I've got these like data annotations using the data star library. And so there's this weird situation where you've got to like build these JavaScript strings where you have some server-side values that are like interpolated into the JavaScript in Pug. And that part's really kind of annoying as well. You've worked with React for almost a decade now. Yeah, React is, it's really good. There's a lot of good stuff about it, and it has a huge ecosystem, which is really nice as well. Especially once you kind of get used to the rendering flow. I do prefer conceptually things like Vue or like Solid.js, where it uses JSX, but also has more of like a signal-based reactive architecture. But there's just so much less tooling around that in comparison to React that it's just not really worth it. If I was building an actual production app, I would pick React for sure. You started a new app with a team in WebAssembly and C#. Ooh, that sounds fun. Is that using like the Blazor? Is that a thing? Are you using this? Yeah, nice. I've always been kind of curious about Blazor. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I guess it's just like Blazor. But I used to work at a company where we did a lot of C# and I really liked it. As long as it's not like, we had some things where it's like ASPX files, where it's just a ton of mixture of code and presentation. That was annoying. But if things are actually using MVC.NET and stuff, it was great. But really, every use case you've used so far with Blazor has had support. Well, that's good to hear. That was kind of my concern with it, honestly, is like it, at least when I first looked at it, which honestly was years ago now, it felt like a fairly new framework. And new frameworks are always a little bit iffy. You know what I mean? Like it might not have the feature that you need, and that can be a breaking thing if it's a framework. So maybe I'll have to check it out sometime. Maybe that could be my next side project, because I'm kind of curious about WebAssembly and I have always liked C#. Hey, how are you? How's building going? It's going good. At this point, the project is kind of, the core functionality is there. So I've just been sort of like adding some features and improving some things. Obviously the UI is, still in a needs improvement phase, but yeah. Not the biggest fan of Visual Studio, but you have .NET installed and the wizard in VS can get you started in seconds. Yeah, Visual Studio, I'm not the biggest fan of it either, but for what it does, I mean, it does it. We used Visual Studio when I was doing the C# stuff, and it's like, you know, if you're fully within that Microsoft ecosystem, which I do, you know, program on Windows, so in theory, it wouldn't be that bad for me to use Visual Studio. It works great, and like IntelliSense in Visual Studio is amazing, and yeah, but it has so many features and things that it's actually pretty heavyweight. Like it can be hard. I remember having trouble like even getting all the right things installed to get it working with the proper version, and then it's like it upgrades and it's a huge pain. But it's nice, and it has like all those templates for like if you're starting an app, it can like scaffold the whole beginning of the app for you. I don't know if there's like a Blazor template, but I could imagine that would probably help quite a bit when you're getting started. But usually for personal stuff, I use VS Code, as you can see, which, you know, I don't know, not a strong relation there. But even if I was writing C#, I would probably also use VS Code just because I imagine it must have decent tooling for that as well. It doesn't need to be a perfectly integrated ecosystem. One of the crazy things about Visual Studio that I remember is it had like kind of deep integration with like Azure, where you could like deploy your code to your Azure cloud like directly from Visual Studio. I always thought that was kind of cool, but also like not at all how I would like to work, but just that the feature was there. I was like, geez, that's a powerful IDE. But normally I like to, you know, do more of a GitOps style thing where it's like when you deploy it, you know, the latest code in your branch is automatically deployed in some kind of CI/CD workflow. But anyway. Never understood living in the IDE until you worked for an Azure shop. Yeah, I can believe that. I've never actually worked for an Azure shop, so I haven't had that the pleasure of that experience. But I don't know. I've done a lot of stuff with AWS and GCP, and those seem to work pretty well. My experiences with Azure is usually a lot more like I don't even really understand exactly what's going on. The documentation is all like kind of out of date and confusing. But maybe if you have that tooling, you're like in that Microsoft ecosystem, it's easier to deal with that. Okay. God forbid the GUI docs are never updated like the CI docs. Yeah. Well, I mean, knowing Microsoft, who really knows? The docs are pretty hit or miss, seems like. But then there's some that are like really good. So it's like, well, I don't know. Like the C# docs are really good. I guess the .NET platform docs or whatever you call them, not really C#. I'm sure the C# ones are good too, though. I've completely lost my train of whatever I was doing here. I updated both of these display string for table things. Yeah, so that should be fine. Okay. I do want to also update the way that these values are passed into the charts as well. Before I forget, so that would be in the historical page, we have these charts. Let's open that. I already have that open. These are rendered with chart.js, and the values are passed into them here. And then it goes through this function up here. So here, I mean, really it should be fine, except there's never going to be a raw param value. But maybe it doesn't hurt to leave that case in. Well, let's just get rid of it. Pardon me. Okay, so, right, that's fine. Yeah, okay. That's looking a little better. And these not a number things are kind of from the previous version of the way that the parameters were constructed, so we can sort of ignore that. It's not going to be a problem anymore. So the one other thing I wanted to do here before I forget, again, is I want this to have an empty default state. So it's possible to have no intensity set. So for that, if we go to the today page here, here is our intensity select. And so we're going to need so like we're passing in this all intensities. And we're going to need another one where it's something like, well, let's just do it like this. Value, empty string. And what is the format for this again? Oh, it's ID and name. Okay. So it would be ID, empty string, name, empty string. And this is just going to give us a default, name. This is just going to give us a default case in that select, where if there is no intensity, there's not going to be anything put in there. So now if I add a new set here, it's going to default to an empty intensity. If I change something, then what it's going to send is intensity as an empty string. And so now if I look over here, that new set intensity actually doesn't exist, which is what we want to see. But if I do switch it to something like low, now look over here, refresh, now that intensity is low. And presumably it should work for all the values. Yep. And if I set it back to the empty string, then that goes away. Great. Okay. That's pretty good. So these are kind of all going to be coupled together here. So it's like updating the way, like improving parameter building and parsing to be more consistent. Okay, and let's again double check if I have any console.logs in here. Yeah, nothing going on there. That's good. Commit. Okay. Let's check that off in our notes. I think I had a note for that. Did I have a note for that? Doesn't look like it. It was just a bug in the way this table was rendered. So, okay. The other thing that I could maybe do, we are pretty much at time here. Usually I stop after about 2 hours. But one thing I kind of want to see is like, say I set this to 1, 2, 3. Let's actually go back here, over here. Well, that's interesting. First of all, we have another bug. So when I'm putting the value in here, it's saving it to the database. Fine. Like I do 2, I refresh this, that 2 is there. But the default value for this input is no longer correct because of how we changed the way that those parameter values are being stored. I think just the tables and these are the only things that's actually rendering those parameter values. So once I fix these inputs, we should be good to go. So if it's weight or distance, we're doing that. If it's duration, we're doing that. If it's intensity, we're doing that. Otherwise, it's actually just going to be param value dot value. And intensity is also going to need to be this should be a param value. And we need to add the dot value. Okay. So now, okay, what are we complaining about? This is another thing I don't like about Pug, is like I can't actually use the full suite of JavaScript syntax in here. Like what I would like to do is like a question mark dot value, but you can't do that in Pug. It's not like true JavaScript, which is a little annoying. You also like can't use const. You got to use var. Like there's just a bunch of kind of weird stuff. But anyway. Okay, so with that, now we should be able to see these, things. And if I set this to medium and refresh the page, it's still set to medium. So that is actually populating those values correctly. And these other four shouldn't have changed at all. So they should all be fine now. Yep, cool. And if I set one of these to 0, that should also be fine. And if I look over here, that 0 is in the table. If I set one to nothing, though, what does that do? So now the weight is empty. If I refresh the page here, it's properly set that to empty, it seems like. If I look over here, it's empty. Awesome. So it seems to be working all right. This bit I'm going to include in the last commit because basically that last commit was broken and now it's hopefully not. Okay, and with that, I think I'm going to wrap up. Let's push these changes. Thanks, all. It was nice talking with you. See you next week.